we got a issue here that, you know, I've known for quite some times that there was a problem. I just didn't realize the extent of the problem. To be quite honest with you, Homeland Security should be more concerned about what's going on right now with our universities and our colleges. That just makes me sick at my stomach to think the whole time that they was attacking me, trying to set me up, and trying to prove to the world that I was some sort of a monster. The true monsters are the ones that was slipping in the back door. And as I've said a many times before, it's the small fox that'll spoil the vine as far as the vineyard. The big ones you see coming. You can knock them out of the way. But it's the little bitty ones. They chew over here, they chew over there, and the next thing you know, they've done killed the whole grape vineyard. In 1963, whenever JFK was assassinated, if you'll listen very carefully to his very last message, he was on to what that these people was going to do as far as unifying the colleges all over the nation, all over the globe, that a lot of people was against. And the reason why that they was against these things is because they seen it as being a weakness. They seen it as it being a breach. Even a great deal of the business sector over in Union City, Tennessee, give or take about 15, 18 miles from here, whenever the universities first come into this area, they wasn't interested. They didn't want that. And I'm pretty sure that they had many reasons, but this was one of them right here that you're fixing to listen to, pertaining to how that our children's minds have been altered, have basically been brainwashed because of certain campaign contribution people that come in there, and because they contributed this particular amount of money or that particular amount of money, now all of a sudden they feel like that they have a right to have a strong say-so. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not contrary to our culture and to our policies and to the things that we believe in and we practice. But that's just it. They wasn't coming in and conforming the minds of the weak in pertaining to supporting America. You know, you wonder how come before Donald Trump become president that so many of these university colleges, regardless whether it was basketball, football, whatever kind of ball, man, they was really making a big stance. The sports directors and players was really making a big stance towards basically being defiant out on a national stage. Some of them wouldn't even pledge allegiance. Some of them kneeled rather than put their hand on their heart. I mean, there was all kinds of disrespect activity that it wasn't until Donald Trump became president that basically put an end to a lot of that. But now we're figuring out where it actually come from. You see, in 1983, whenever an automobile accident that I was involved in, and my distant aunt that I think was an Alexander, she may have been a Pinnock, I don't know for sure. But anyways, they was kin to us. She taught school over here in Martin, Tennessee for years. And then I think she finally got a degree. And I think she taught a little bit of college. But the main theme in behind Zorabella Lovelace's life and her husband's life was that they owned a great deal of property right around where the university, where UTM University is. And because of it, it basically made them rich. They was at the right place at the right time with the right property. and they become rich. Well, I was allotted their estate towards cleaning it up, that I physically watched her basically give Union University down in Jackson, Tennessee, a university down there, almost $2 million pertaining to her estate, while her daughter, her only living daughter, got basically $1. Now, you keep in mind, this was the same woman that come to my hospital bed in 1983 after that automobile rode over on top of me and looked at me and said, well, Dennis, it's no doubt that God saved your life. It's going to be up to you now to figure out what it was all about pertaining to why he saved your life. Now, this woman in 1983 was within her faculties. But about 5 years later, I think it was in 87, maybe 86, whenever I was allotted towards cleaning up her estate and I had to hire a crew to come in there and help me. And my God, at the stuff that we seen that is absolutely undesirable, much less unspeakable, towards how somebody would live as far as being nothing but a hermit and a hoarder. And probably throwed at least $100,000 worth of books that got ruined in her basement. And we're talking about books that goes all the way back to the 12th, 13th, 1400s. That was just basically soggy because of the basement leaking, and she become senile to the degree that she couldn't stay on top of the game towards what was going on with her home. And basically, a leaking basement ruined all them books. Now, she had all kinds of old furniture in the colonial era with the lion's feet, where just a bedroom suit alone would probably go for $50,000. Not counting all her real estate, not counting the house that she had, which was basically a 3-story house, and all her apartments, plus all the money that her and her husband had almost used the word conjured up, received from UTM University here in Martin, Tennessee, in Weakley County, Tennessee. I knew that there was something that was totally out of order. Whenever you have a person, first of all, that comes to your bed and says, well, I know God saved your life, but didn't offer no type of assistance. The only thing that I can say that she offered was that my younger brother needed to get his GED, and she did help David Jeffrey Jackson obtain his GED because she was a teacher. And she knowed how to coach and go over the areas that needed to be gone over pertaining to him getting his GED. So he got his GED because of Zorbel Lovelace. That was about the only thing that I can honestly say that my family received from a distant family member that was basically a millionaire. Over a millionaire. Even my son has questioned me about her towards how come she didn't offer to help you if she knew that God had spared your life? How come she didn't offer to help you towards seeking a divine reason and trying to be part of that movement? And this is the answer to it right here. What you're fixing to listen to in the next 30 minutes is basically the answer that I and others have been looking for of how come, why in the world would the minority, and I guess the majority both, here in America, sway towards siding up with Hamas versus siding up with Jerusalem, knowing that Jerusalem stands for a holy, righteous, eternal God. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Well, you're fixing to get the answer of why that has recently occurred just within the past 2.5 months. And to think that our so-called Homeland Security our United States government has allowed for this to occur, it is absolutely asinizing to me, much less appalling and sickening and all the above towards how our United States government has failed we the people. Please listen.
From foreign governments. And a sizable portion of those funds were said to be donated from authoritarian regimes all over the world. Again, they mentioned Qatar, Saudi Arabia, China, the UAE. That's a report from the Network Contagion Research Institute. A May 2023 report from the American-Israeli Cooperative Enterprise found the Arab countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Egypt with a...
Now, I've been telling people now for quite some time of who the actual mastermind was pertaining to 9/11. And people want to blow me off like I'm still somebody that out of his wits. Even though we have FBI agents that has followed the money trail from Saudi Arabia, supporting, financing just about all of the terrorists. We know for a fact that the Saudi prince, the family was over here in America whenever 9/11 happened because they requested for special immunity coming from the president of the United States at that time, which was young Bush, of leaving the continental United States, even though an order had just been given towards grounding all commercial flights. The only thing that was flying above the continental United States at that time was nothing but military personnel and military personnel only. But they got to leave. They got to go home. They basically set their own family member up pretending to be Bin Laden in making the world think, after we had figured out who actually was part of that, of banning Bin Laden from Saudi Arabia. What a front. What a front. All right, let's go back to 1963, whenever JFK got assassinated, because basically they did not want the International Exchange Student College Program to come into play here in the United States, because certain people seen this as a breach. Like I said, Union City, Tennessee, over here in Obion County, whenever all the colleges first come into play, basically in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Obion County didn't want it. And the reason why that they didn't want it, is because now you're fixing to see why others, as well as JFK, did not want to put the American people in harm's way pertaining to a possible breach, that now there's no other way that you can analyze it or suffice it, interpret it, towards it being basically a sabotage movement from within our own government. A sabotage move from within in our own government. And you know, I've always looked at the real estate quality of sales, that no matter who you are, what you are, it don't matter if you got yens, it don't matter if you got euros, it don't matter what kind of currency that you have, that you can come over to America and basically buy up all the real estate that you want as long as it was for sale. And then go back home, and you didn't even have to be a dual citizen to do it. To where in most countries, you actually have to be a citizen, or you at least have to be married to somebody that was a citizen before you have eligibility to be able to do that, no matter how powerful, how rich you are, no matter if you're Bill Gates or Elon Musk. Listen to the rest of this, because I'm telling you right now, it's absolutely mind-boggling in how our Secret Service, Homeland Security failures that just keep piling them on top of each other again and again and again, to the degree of where we are right now as an American sovereign people.
We're the top donors to American universities. According to a study published in 2022 by the National Association of Academics in the United States, a study that did not cause too much noise at the time, in the period between 2001 and 2021, precisely after the 9/11 attacks, the Qataris donated a whopping $4.7 billion. Precisely after the 9/11 attacks, between 2001 and 2021, precisely after the 9/11 attacks.
There you go. Now, if you're going to infiltrate a group of people, if you're basically going to abolish them, what a better way to do it than starting with the children in the universities that's teaching these children. You know, there's a reason why that Russia, whenever they was bombing Ukraine, was grabbing up all the children and bringing them back to Russia. You know why? Because those was the young minds that they could, those was the young, undeveloped minds that they could basically go in and start teaching them at a young age whatever that the Russian government desired for them to hear. Even if it wasn't true, if you start out teaching children at a young enough age, you can basically convince them that the moon is made out of cheese. I'm just using that for a metaphor that young, undeveloped minds are the very things that they have chosen to weaponize pertaining to these people that have come in and sabotaged our great nation.
The Qataris donated a whopping $4.7 billion to universities in the United States.
That's billion. That ain't million. That's billion with a B.
The recipients, however, did not report part of the money received as required by federal law. Again, Qatar is the largest foreign donor to American academia, followed by Communist China, followed by Saudi Arabia, and then Russia. Qatar's donations are paving the way for the deepening influence of its shadows over more and more fields and geographic areas. It says in the United States, it was believed that deepening the cooperation with Qatar and receiving donations to establish branches of prestigious American universities were another way to expand its soft power.
Say that again. Another way to expand its soft power. There's a terminology with Homeland Security pertaining to soft targets that even certain politicians that goes to certain churches are examined more thoroughly because of a soft target. Now you're looking at soft power. Put both of them together, okay?
To expand its soft power. But in practice, it became the opposite. Through its vast capital, Qatar is paving the way for the deepening influence of its shadows over more and more fields of geographical areas, especially in the United States. Cornell, Georgetown, Northwestern, and Carnegie Mellon universities, who've received the most funding from Qatar, have established satellite schools in Doha, the capital of Qatar. Cornell, which belongs to the American Ivy League, or as I've been saying, the Poison Ivy League, and others have graciously repeated that. It's very important. It's the Poison Ivy League. They opened a medical school for $1.8 billion.
That's with a B now. Now they've dropped the market a little bit here on the $750 million.
$1 billion. Georgetown received $750 million for a school of government. So they're funding specific.
Where is Georgetown? If it's the right Georgetown that I'm thinking about, it's right in Washington, D.C., right out from Washington, D.C., less than about 5 miles. What a better way to weaken an establishment is by going in and conforming the young, undeveloped minds in believing one thing that is the total opposite of our practices and policies over here.
Within the universities. And Northwestern established a journalism school. I wonder if Jake Tapper went there, for which it received $600 million in 2007. The report is more fulsome than what I'm reading to you right here. Isn't this breaking news that academia has been bought and paid for by communist, fascistic, Islamist regimes? By monarchies? Isn't that important to know? Students for Justice in Palestine, the Hamas funding network are all involved in our colleges and universities. These colleges and universities have become Stalinist-like rat nests. And that's why we have so many tenured professors who hate America, Marxists and Islamists.
Now I want to bring up something else. They basically played the same trick before Adolf Hitler made his rise. If you'll study the propaganda that Adolf Hitler was proclaiming over in that area, they was actually sending people to America in the 1920s. That was to help conform, brainwash, and basically be Nazi sympathizers pertaining to the ideology that basically began about 15 or 20 years before Adolf Hitler finally made his grandstand debut with World War II. Now, I've been saying all along that ever since the assassination of JFK in 1963, America has been crawfishing and our politicians has been basically giving the farm away. Keep in mind, it was the Kennedys that was against this university college exchange student program. Just like Union City, Tennessee, and Northwest Tennessee was against the colleges because they looked at that towards it being a potential threat. You start out with a breach and then it turns into a threat. Now, how come Homeland Security, how come our politicians, how come the people that we have paid millions and millions of dollars to has not seen this coming down the pike way before now? I didn't go to college. Matter of fact, I didn't even get a GED. But if I would have been experimenting that closely into the college's, I guess you'd call it the main bloodline, I believe I would have been able to have picked this up. Especially if I was computer savvy, in which I probably wouldn't have been because I didn't finish out my GED. But I'm just saying that I think that I would have been able to have caught this. And it's only just now coming out to the American people. Please listen.
That's why you're seeing what you're seeing in the streets, and I'll even take it further. That's why I think you saw the riots in 2020. That all these elements came together. The Marxists like BLM and Antifa, the Islamists on our college campuses and so forth. That was the time to really try and take down our cities and take down America, right? These are the forces that are at work. It's not America. It's not the American people. We also are funding this. Our state legislatures, even Republican legislatures, continue to write checks to colleges and universities.
My God.
And when we have a governor who actually stands up to that, they're under attack by Republicans, by rhinos, by establishment Republicans. So the ruling class in Washington, D.C., and the ruling classes in state capitals all over the country, Democrat and Republican, have closed their eyes. China, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Russia, and others own our colleges and universities. That's a fact. I'll be right back.
So basically, they have had open access to the undeveloped minds in teaching them what they wanted to teach them.
Welcome back, America. Honestly, one of my scholarly heroes is Christopher Rufo. This guy has guts. This guy has brains. He knows how to communicate. He has ripped this badge off of what's going on in this country with this American Marxist movement that has insinuated itself into the worst places, our educational system. He's with the Manhattan Institute, the City Journal. I want to welcome you. Happy New Year, Christopher Rufo. Now, you were really taking a very close look at the former president of Harvard, who will now be a multimillionaire faculty member, Claudine Gay, and you and a colleague of yours helped expose her plagiarism. Are you surprised by the extent to which the American media, so-called civil rights leaders, and academia generally has come to her support like a Praetorian Guard?
I'm not surprised at all, because Claudine Gay was the symbol of the DEI regime that has conquered American academic life.
Now, there's your deep state. You want to know where your deep state is? It begins with the undeveloped minds that has now been going on since 9/11, full force. It started, the wheel started turning in the early 1960s. There was some conflict, there was some hiccups. We had the Vietnam War, we had, the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War, and then we had 9/11, and we had Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and we had the Afghanistan War. So now, since the dust is clearing, and we went through COVID, we're starting to see the real picture in just exactly how far that our American institutions has swayed to the left, and basically in an anti-Christ type way. And you wonder how come Hollywood has bombarded our networks with all this paranormal, Harry Potter, witchcraft. It actually started a little bit during Dream of Jeannie, whenever she could twitch her little nose and basically cast a spell on people. People thought that was kind of cute, okay? And it really didn't have a deep attraction to it or a meaning to it like these movies today do. Back whenever I was growing up, the worst gory thing that I ever seen at a young age was basically The Exorcist and Chainsaw Massacre. Today, The Exorcist and Chainsaw Massacre is actually looked at towards being a category B or C movie compared to the movies that they're putting out today here in America, in once more brainwashing undeveloped minds.
Prioritize race and sex, or ancestry and anatomy over scholarly merit, over fairness, over equality, over every other principle. And so the left had to come to her defense because she represented the top prize. And that's why I fought so hard, both exposing the plagiarism and also putting pressure on Harvard to topple her, because I knew that we were going to expose their contradictions. We were going to make it very uncomfortable. And we ultimately forced them to make a choice. Was Harvard going to prioritize truth or racialist ideology? Ultimately, it became untenable because donors, the American people, and political leaders like Elise Stefanik said that it was not going to be possible for them to continue as they did. And very thankfully, as the beginning of this campaign, certainly not the end, Claudine Gay is now gone. We've exposed the DEI regime, and there's much more to come.
Much more to come. Apparently, Barack Obama had an invisible hand behind this, and I suspect there's a lot of people on the radical political left and in academia who've been working behind the scenes under the radar to defend her and promote her. But she's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't she? Isn't it the fact that Harvard and so many of these universities have a rotten culture within now that the way faculty hires faculty, the way faculty hires administrators and presidents, this is all incestuous. So this is the tip of the iceberg, and we really need to dig in further.
That's 100% right. I think that Claudine Gay, of course, is the kind of top symbol, the highest academic official in American universities as the president of Harvard, but by no means is she the exception. And so what I'm going to be doing in the weeks and months going forward is digging into the academic work of other top administrators and scholars and professors at the Ivy League universities to find out exactly how far the rot goes. And we're going to be exposing people who are not living up to these standards. And then showing the American people, who, by the way, give billions of dollars of taxpayer funding each year to these universities, that they should no longer submit, they should no longer simply kowtow to the supposed expertise at places like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, even Georgetown, but in fact they should trust their own intuitions, and they should demand that political leaders stop writing a blank check to left-wing racialist ideologues that hate American principles and that hate the taxpayers that subsidize their salaries.
And isn't the reaction to all this evidence that these people hate merit, they hate real competition, that they really are advancing a hardcore, in my view, Marxist ideological agenda? I mean, some of the people Gay stole from were black. She stole from Carol Swain, yet Carol Swain doesn't get the kind of laudatory coverage that Gay does, and yet Gay's stealing from Swain for her writings and so forth. And she's not the only minority that Gay stole from. How come Jake Tapper, how come Al Sharpton, how come Joe Scarborough, how come none of them are coming to the defense of people who had their intellectual property stolen from them and then used as a lie to create, in effect, Claudine Gay's so-called scholarship?
Well, for two reasons. One, because Carol Swain, the great black scholar, former professor at Princeton and then Vanderbilt, is a conservative. She believes in colorblind equality. She opposes affirmative action. And so among left-wing scholars, both black and white, Carol Swain is an apostate. She's a defector from this ideology. She has to be put away. She has to be denied and ignored. And so it's totally justified in their view for someone like Claudine Gay to steal from Carol Swain. And the second thing, I mean, you know, to be blunt about it, the same kind of principles that you see in black-on-black violence in inner cities, you see in this black-on-black plagiarism at Harvard. It's totally excused because it doesn't fit in with the left-wing narrative that, according to critical race theory, for example, only whites or whiteness can serve as an oppressive force, and all crimes that take away from the power of the supposed white power structure should not only be forgiven, but they should be actually encouraged, subsidized, and justified. And so I'm not surprised at all. We've seen that Harvard sacrificed its core principles on the altar of DEI, and whoever's hurt, whether it's Carol Swain, whether it's the great Professor Ronald Sullivan or Roland Fryer, these are black professors at Harvard who were trashed and tarnished by Claudine Gay. All of that is forgiven because Claudine Gay is a reliable and dutiful servant of the DEI regime.
When we come back, Christopher Rufo, doesn't this also explain that our college campuses are really throwbacks to racism and segregation based on race and based on faith? And doesn't it also demonstrate how our admissions policies have been destroyed, Harvard among them, discriminating openly and blatantly against Asian Americans and so forth? Aren't these the new entities that use the tactics of the Old South, applied to Marxist principles, and then oppose them on the American people? I'll ask you this again when we return. I'll be right back.
See, if they would have succeeded in brainwashing everybody over here in America pertaining to the Aryanism, Nazism movement, it is a possibility that America never would have gotten involved with the Second World War, even after being bombed by Pearl Harbor, if they would have basically come in and taken over the minds of people's thoughts in what people was supposed to have thought about pertaining to Nazism, pertaining to people being sympathizers, Nazi sympathizers. it's a possibility that in and of itself would have been enough to have pulled the wool over the American people's eyes and not been a harsh retaliation over it. I wouldn't like to believe that it would have had, but there is an entity, an evil entity that has been gnawing and pawing and trying to take America over for, I guess, ever since the Revolutionary War towards us hurting a bunch of people's feelings whenever the American people stood up and said, you know what? We don't want what King George III wants. It wasn't just over taxes. That's only part of it. That's kind of like saying the Civil War was only about slavery. Slavery in the Civil War was only part of it. You have to be able to break it down and analyze that there were several entities going on at the same time during the Civil War, just like there were several entities that was going on pertaining to World War II, just like there were several entities going on pertaining to 9/11, and now, since all this is starting to come out into the wash and the dust is starting to settle, look at what is occurring.
Welcome to Fox News Live. I'm Aisha Hasmi. A major...
It's actually scary. It is actually scary in thinking that we are this close in basically destroying the sacrifices of our men and women that have bled, sweat, blood, and tears of Abraham Lincoln's original visionary vision of justice for all. It is absolutely appalling to think that we have come this close of throwing all of their labors, all of their desires, all of their ambitions down the drain voluntarily. I've said this before. The fox is no longer guarding the hen house, but now the fox is inside the hen house and he's devouring the hens. And if he ain't coming in one form, he's coming in another form. It's not just the illegal immigrants that's coming over the border pertaining to an invasion. There's so many different cracks and gaps in how that the American sovereign patriot has basically dropped the ball on all this, and I can't say everything about how I feel because it wouldn't be permissible on the airwaves. Because it's that gut-wrenching. Gut-wrenching. So it's not just one particular entity pertaining to Russia, or another particular entity pertaining to China, or another particular entity pertaining to Hamas. But it's all the above that wanted to destroy the sovereignty of the Christian open democracy movement that began back during the Civil War here in America. I've never seen anything like it. And like I said, it's frightful. It really is. It's absolutely frightful to think that we have this many gaps of things that has fallen through the cracks that nobody has really paid attention to up until now. Up until now. You know, it hadn't been too long that California actually was voting on the fact of banning the King James Version Bible from the state of California. Now, what started that movement? There you go. It hadn't been too long ago, up until Donald Trump became president, that basically it was going to be illegal to put out lascivity scenes pertaining to Jesus Christ, Virgin Mary, and Joseph and the three wise men. We are being attacked. Just like the Bible talks about in the last days, that Satan will come down in great wrath because he or it knoweth his time is short. And if he ain't coming in one form, he's coming in 1,000 other different forms. But the bottom line is trying to destroy the Christian sovereignty of this great nation. The Christian sovereignty of this great nation. We actually have people in Congress that openly bashes and puts down the American government, even though it's the American government that's feeding them and giving them their checks every month. And up until Donald Trump became president, I guess it was basically socially acceptable to take an American flag and burn it on national TV during a football game or a baseball game. I had never seen such sickening remarks and actions coming from various people that has basically sabotaged our whole culture over here. And you wonder how come I'm so passionate about all the videos that I put out? This is why. This is why.
A great book, America's Cultural Revolution. Chris, so my question when we left was this. Racism, segregation, outright discrimination based on race and religion has now been wrapped up into this whole Marxist ideology and is now practiced on our college campuses. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's totally correct. And in fact, I did a report on Harvard and on Claudine Gay's tenure as dean and president. And the facts are actually stunning. Claudine Gay oversaw and then defended the practice of discriminating against white and Asian applicants to Harvard in a system that the Supreme Court found to be unconstitutional. Claudine Gay built a DEI empire on campus. She led an initiative to dename buildings of white men, people who were deemed to be racist. She tried to run a program to reduce the visual presence of white men on campus, taking down pictures of white males who had been, previous Harvard presidents and other Harvard affiliates. And then, of course, she minimized anti-Semitism on campus, giving really bloodthirsty anti-Semitic mobs a free rein under the guise of free speech, while she was enforcing arcane rules about pronouns and about microaggressions on everyone else. And so if you look at the record, Claudine Gay, who, of course, accused her critics of being racist. I don't like playing the racism tabulation game. It's not something I like to do. But if Claudine Gay insists on that game, the evidence suggests that, in fact, Claudine Gay oversaw a systemically racist institution. She built a systemically racist bureaucracy, and she justifies it because she believes she's discriminating against the wrong kind of people, the bad people who deserve this kind of punishment and unequal treatment.
I call this civil rights Marxism because I believe the civil rights movement has now moved from in my view, a legitimate movement about equal rights, equal justice, applying the Constitution, treating human beings as individuals, to now the opposite. Now we're back to grouping individuals based on race. It just depends on what race and faith you are. On this issue of anti-Semitism in Harvard and all these colleges and universities and all the foreign funding they're getting from the Middle East and communist China and so forth and so on, isn't it amazing that these institutions move towards Marxism and Islamicism, and yet they grab as much money as possible from billionaire donors and from governments, and they don't actually live the life that they want the rest of us to live? Perfect example is Claudine Gay. She's going to make $900,000 a year as a faculty member. Isn't this really preposterous?
It is, but fortunately, the situation is changing. I've spoken with many of those billionaire donors in recent weeks, and they tell me that they thought they were donating to their old alma mater. They thought they were donating to great scholarship at Harvard, and they were really hoodwinked, they were duped, and they were tricked by these universities that sell a bill of goods to donors and then fund radical decolonization theory. They fund a really vicious scholarship under the guise of critical race theory. And these donors are finally waking up to the reality of the situation. Donors at Harvard in particular have withheld now $1 billion in funding, demanding changes. And so I'm actually optimistic that these are guys that are in tech or in finance or in other business professions, very busy people. They weren't paying attention. Guess what? Now they're paying attention. Now they're reading America's Cultural Revolution, my book you mentioned. And now they're going to say no more money until you clean up your act. No more racism against white and Asian students. No more racism against Jews on campus. And no more nonsense. It's time to restore truth, not racialist ideology, as the highest principle at Harvard University and beyond.
Are you concerned that MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post actually have people on the payroll, hosts, contributors, so-called reporters and commentators, who are promoting this anti-Semitism, this racism, this segregation on our college campuses, and quite frankly, in the nation as a whole? And then when somebody like you points it out, they try and turn the tables and call you a racist going after a black woman. What do you say to those people?
I say that it's not 2020 anymore. Those tactics don't work. Simply calling everything racist is not only intellectually bankrupt, but it's now an ineffective strategy. And so the magic spell of the left that might have worked in the summer of 2020 is not working anymore now. And so we are coming after those people who are trying to be the kind of race hustlers 2.0. We're exposing their hypocrisy. We're exposing their grift. We're exposing their lies. And I think that the American people are finally willing to stand up to the fact that we want individual equality. We want a colorblind meritocracy, and we're not going to play the game anymore of reducing people to group racial categories and then trying to judge them on the basis of their ancestry rather than on their individual talents. And so I will take the slings and arrows every single day because I'm standing up for colorblind equality. That is a 90% position among the American people, and nothing is going to stop me until we've abolished DEI and restored that beautiful principle of colorblind equality in all of America's institutions.
Fantastic.
Man, I like what he just said. I like what he just said, especially whenever he characterized it towards intellectual bankruptcy. And that's exactly what it is. It's intellectual nonsense of people trying to use old ideals, old strategies that has now seeped into the minds of the young and the weak. That's like whenever I investigated the Branch Davidians down in Waco, down by Waco, Texas, I felt so sorry for the children and the majority of the women that was involved with that Klan down there that had basically been sucked up by one particular person, David Koresh, that was basically puppets doing just exactly what he desired for them to do and when he wanted them to do it. Same differences of Jim Jones, an occultist that basically talked a group of people in drinking poison Kool-Aid. I have never ever thought that I would have witnessed, heard, seen, or experienced what I have experienced for the past 35 years for standing up for the Lord Jesus Christ. But you know what? It's occurred. And it didn't occur in a third world country, and it didn't occur in a communist country, but it occurred right here in the good old USA. That I can validate everything that I talk about either on data, paper, or medical, or legal, political records. And still don't get no supporters. Still don't get no movement. Still can't rally the people. And we're talking about a region right here in Northwest Tennessee that was supposed to be rock solid with the ideology of David Crockett and Daniel Boone. And I've been attacked, humiliated, demonized, and dehumanized by my own people. And you wonder how come I'm so passionate after 30 some odd years, actually 40, of being conned, ripped off, lied about, set up, entrapped. And I could go on and on and on just because of my anointing that the Heavenly Father has placed up into my life. Well, I'm going to tell you what. Everybody's going to have a testimony that's a true born-again Christian. And it doesn't matter if you're an American Christian, don't matter if you're a Russian Christian, don't matter if you're a Chinese Christian, don't matter if you're a China Christian. Everybody's going to have a testimony. I truly believe, and I'm not trying to give myself any credit because, trust me, I'm leery. I'm sickening of the fact of me even having a testimony that is actually compatible with Jesus Christ's testimony and some of the other prophets in the Bible's testimony of how deeply offended and how persecuted that those men and women was standing up for the ways of righteousness. I truly believe that my testimony, after it's all said and done with, and I ain't saying that I'm an angel, and I'm not saying that some of that stuff I didn't bring upon to myself, but you know, whenever you have a group of people that you couldn't rally, that you couldn't move, that was consistent in basically saying, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a fraud, you're a fraud, you're a blasphemer, was basically what that they was telling me. The exact same thing that they was telling the Lord Jesus Christ. For what good work dost thou persecute me for? Jesus asked. And they replied, for a good work we persecute you not, but for you saying that you are the Son of God, that's why we're going to kill you, is because we know that you're not the Son of God. In other words, they was telling Jesus that he was basically a fraud, a liar. They was telling Jesus Christ that he was a imposter, is what the world was telling Jesus. And basically that's what my own people have declared me as over here, of either being a liar, a heretic, or somebody that was sick, that was out of his mind. And now all this stuff has come back to haunt them. Has come back to haunt them. And as I have said before, and I'll say again, and I say this regrettably, it could not have happened to a better group of people. Those that have allowed for this to get in the shape that it's in right now. They're going to have a great deal to give an account for one day, not just to God, but to the American people that have struggled, sacrificed, and some of them paid the ultimate sacrifice for us to be able to maintain an open, free, fair democracy. And that's the very thing that's been eroding ever since I have stood out to announce the message coming from the Windmill Ministries missions. It has went from bad to worse, from worser to worser, to worser to worsest. And we're still on the trajectory of going backwards from peace, love, grace, mercy, and utopia. All the divorces, all the bankruptcies, all the drugs, all the drug overdoses, all the gun violence, all the illegal immigrants being $34 trillion in debt. I could go on and on and on in how that the American establishment has lost its original footing.
I mean, you're basically carrying the banner of Martin Luther King, which of course now is racist. I want to thank you very much, Christopher Rufo. Keep up the great work, and we'll keep following you, keep having you on the program. God bless and be safe, sir.
God bless.
We'll be right back.
Good luck to all of us. That's the reason why almost on every one of my messages, there's very few messages that I don't tell the people, good luck. Good luck to all of us. Because we're reaching a historical destitute of oncoming events that are either coming at us in one direction or coming at us from another. And now the planet is warming up from the inside out towards the continents warming up. That's basically evaporating rivers, evaporating lakes, evaporating watersheds, evaporating other things on a level that scientists and meteorologists could not even begin to fathom. The oceans are rising on levels that the scientists and meteorologists cannot even fathom. In other words, it's a runaway train. People like myself can see the runaway train, and it's almost like a runaway train in slow motion being developed, just like Winston Churchill studied the American Civil War and said that all the elements lined up at the same time, which basically brought forth an atmosphere of a perfect storm. In other words, in his eyes, the Civil War, the American Civil War, was unpreventable, was absolutely unpreventable. Well, if we continue on the road that we're on right now, pertaining to a global, international blow up of some sort, I don't know if it's going to happen over in Ukraine, pertaining to Russia, and going forth into Europe, or if it's going to manifest itself over in the Middle East like it's already been predicted for it to manifest over in the Middle East. But either or, it don't matter. We are seeing the developments right now on this planet that absolutely is exceeding and excelling any dangers that any war has ever brought upon to this great nation called America. And that's combining all the wars together, pertaining to the dangers that even to this day, these Marxists and these people that's brainwashed in all these colleges and these professors are still saying it's Israel's fault. That's like saying it's God's fault. Because we know that the Son of God come from over in the Holy Land. And we know that the Jews was God's chosen people. He didn't start a movement pertaining to the Savior over in Africa. He didn't start a movement pertaining to the Savior over in South America. He didn't start a movement pertaining to the Savior in some other continent. He started it over in the Holy Land. There's a reason why that we defy an explanation per capita of that area being the Holy Land. And the reason why is because God blessed the Jew. God was favored to the Jew. I don't know why. And really and truly, it really don't matter why. Because I'm sure he had to pick somewhere. And it just so happens he found a candidate pertaining to Virgin Mary that he said, you know what? I can deal with this one. Well, God's found other prophets of God. Noah, I can deal with this. Moses, I can deal with this one. Other prophets, Jonah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, these was all prophets of God that God dealt with. And it wasn't that any of them was basically perfect, because even Jesus announced to his followers and the people around him that there was only one perfect, and that was the Father. And that was the Father. Because while you're in this human flesh, you're going to make mistakes. Now, what you do according to those mistakes is going to be a defining moment of whether or not you are a righteous person or a unrighteous person. If you're a righteous person, you're going to own up to those mistakes. And you're going to try to do better the next time, and the next time, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next time. Forgive your brother not 7 times 7, but 70 times 7. And this is an area that even I have to work on. And occasionally I'll talk to some spiritual advisors around in the area, and they'll basically help to open up my eyes to say, you know what, Dennis, maybe you need to just kind of lay off a little bit and smell the coffee, per se. Because I'm only a one-man show, number one. People has already marked me the way that they've marked me. And I'm pretty sure that I could probably talk till I was black and blue in the face. And there's some people around in this area that have known me now for quite some time pertaining to the message, that I couldn't persuade them of the way that they think about me if I was to talk nonstop for the rest of my life or theirs. They have made it up in their minds of what they believe about me and how they believe about me, and there's nothing that I can do to change it. Just like there's nothing that I can do to change the course that humanity has chosen for itself by allowing for all this sin and all this wickedness to come creeping into our lives. And if it wasn't creeping in one way, it was creeping into 1,000 other different ways. And I'm kind of like Jesus whenever he went up into the mountain and he said, Jerusalem, I've gathered you together as a hen would gather her chicks, and you wouldn't listen. I've reached that pivotal moment in my life to where it's like, you know what? This is what they want. They wanted chaos. They wanted basically porn. They wanted everybody to be hooked on this and hooked on that. They wanted to be chemically induced. They wanted for us to be $34 trillion in debt. They wanted for all the crime and all the murders and all the drug overdoses and all the gun violence and all the illegal immigrants. This is what they want, so give them what they want. So it's reached a time in my life to where I basically, you know what? God, this is up to you. This is all in your hands now. You didn't necessarily give me a boat to build, but I do have a refuge. And that refuge is through the Lord Jesus Christ. And if I can't save the rest of them, then it's my obligation to save myself. I've tried to rally the people. I've tried to save this great nation. I've tried to save the people from going through this type of ordeal. Didn't no one want to listen to me pertaining to the baby boomers and basically the Woodstock Grateful Dead followers. They didn't want to listen to this. They thought that I was doing it for 1,001 different reasons other than being sincere and other than it being true and real. I don't know of anybody that would have went through a third of the chaos, basically torture, psychologically and mentally, physically, emotionally torture, since I've stood up for this message coming from the Windmill Ministries missions. I don't know of nobody within 100 miles distance that would be willing to have went through what I've went through. And I'm not saying that braggingly. I'm saying that regrettably. Just like whenever I say it could have happened to a better group of people, I say that remorsefully. Because it's sad and it's true. Who in God's name would have thought that anybody would have witnessed a group of people knocking out windows and going after basically the head people of one of the most sacredest buildings in America, which was the Capitol building? Who in God's name would have thought that that would have occurred? But it did. But it did. You have to be a logical person in asking yourself various questions, and you have to be a practical person in looking at it from all points of angles, that what in the world would have happened to a group of people over here in America that would have struck off towards wanting to basically bring violence and destruction into their own lives. That was one of the reasons why that King George and those that was looking over Lincoln's shoulder was wondering, what the hell is going on over in America? You just got through fighting for your freedom. You just got through having a revolution. You abolished the redcoats pertaining to that particular way of life, and now you're over here killing yourselves? What is going on with these people? Is what a lot of these diplomats and a lot of these kings and stuff was thinking whenever the Civil War broke out. Well, don't you think that they're thinking the same thing today? If they thought that then, whenever the Civil War broke out, especially with the Revolutionary War still being as fresh as what it was, basically less than 100 years, it was on a lot of people's minds towards what America just got through defeating, and now they're over there defeating themselves. What has brought this type of atmosphere into a group of people that's willing to do that to themselves? Which, once more, is every movement against love, peace, joy, mercy, the teachings coming from the King James Version Bible. It's all the opposite. It's almost like there has been a deliberate movement that has basically been energized, like the energizing bunny that you see on TV pertaining to the batteries. It's like since 1988, whenever Ronald Reagan finally established in settling down Russia and the rest of the superpowers of it not going to have a nuclear war, it's like that everybody now has become energized. And I've said this before, and I don't know if anybody could have understood me, but in ways it's actually caused more damage than it caused good, because at least whenever everybody was scared to death, not knowing if Russia was going to push the buttons first or if America was going to push the buttons first, pertaining to the Russian government over there passing out cyanide pills to its citizens, that way their death wouldn't be so lingering and so miserable. Since we have gotten over that, every smaller terrorist group in the world has now risen up towards wanting to bring that much more pain, misery, and destruction to the rest of us, including, and probably more so, North Korea. North Korea is just itching to wanting to end the world. I don't know if their lives are so miserable over there that they're basically wanting to do a mercy killing on themselves or a mercy killing on the world. But if there was any group out there that is probably more itching than even President Putin of pressing the big bombs, I would say it would even be North Korea. From all indication, I would say it would be them. Now, since recently the war has broke out over in the Holy Land, I don't know. That's another very sticky point, to the point that I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people over there that's got nuclear activity over there, and one thing could lead to another, and another thing could lead to another, to the point that it could actually go bad, and it could go bad before I get in bed good tonight and go to sleep. It could go bad before I wake up in the morning and turn on the news. It could go bad within the next few seconds of me sitting here talking. That's how dangerous that the world has become. That's how dangerous that a lot of these circumstances is boiling into. And this is only one of them right here, pertaining to the colleges, and how that these universities have basically been bought out, taken over. I thought that was very, very weird or odd, unusual, that a grown woman, probably in her 70s, maybe even her 80s, I don't know, Zorobel Lovelace, Zorobel, like the great Zorro, of her giving a university, living here in Northwest Tennessee especially, not out in California, not out in New York, not out in Pennsylvania or Pittsburgh, not out in Chicago or some of these other bigger metropolitan areas, but right here in Northwest Tennessee, going to give her daughter $1 while giving a college the rest of it. So please pray for our great nation. Please, please pray for our troops. Pray for the elderly. Pray for the sick. Pray for the young. Pray for those who have been bamboozled. Pray for those who basically really do not know up from down and down from up. Please pray for our politicians. Please, please pray for our military men and women that sacrifice every day for our freedoms. God bless America. God bless America. God bless America's troops. And God bless us towards where we go forward from this moment on. In the name of the Lord and in the name of peace. Because as it looks right now, things is fixing to break apart. And every bit of it, like I said, has been like the energizing bunny that just keeps going and going and going and going. That's about the best way that I know to express it or to categorize it. It's like the energizing bunny. It keeps going and going and going. Well, eventually, it's going to go somewhere. It's going to go somewhere. And whenever it gets to its point that it's basically going to climax, that's whenever we will basically have reached over the Rubicon of the point of no return. And that is a scary thought with all the souls and all the people out there that has truly never been taught properly and truly has not given their lives over to the Lord Jesus Christ. That is a scary, scary thought of the amount of people that's going to be basically busting hell wide open because they was not accurately taught the proper definition of what up means versus down, what down means versus up. Good luck. Good luck to all of us, and shalom. God bless.